I want to tell you guys a story today that I don't think I've ever told publicly before. The story takes place in it's either late 2017 or early 2018. Takes place with me sitting in my old office at Mercado Partners in Cottonwood Heights near Salt Lake City, Utah. And came after thinking about a proposal to my boss. Um, I believed back then, and I talked to some of you about this back then. I had a really strong belief, as I still do, in the world of sports cards as an alternative investment class, and specifically, I thought that the world of high end had a chance to really explode. And so, this is a number of years ago, right? We're getting close to a decade ago now, and so take that for what it's worth. But I finally got the courage to ask my boss about this idea. And let me give you guys the backdrop here, right? I'm the controller of the funds there at Mercado. That means I'm the accountant, right? I'm like the guy who does the capital calls. I'm the guy who does the accounting, creating the financial statements, assisting the auditors, helping the tax guy. I'm the guy who does all of those things. I help the limited partners get the information that they need and all that stuff. So I'm not an investor, and I am not like a member of the investment team, but our team was pretty small. We had about 12, 13 people at the time. And we were in the process of changing how we did our funds there at Mercado. Traditionally, we had just growth funds. Growth is something that sort of sits between venture and private equity. At least that's how we described it while I was there. And we had some incredibly successful growth funds, but our big boss guy, whose name was Greg had this idea to make us a multi investment type fund umbrella. And so we brought in a group of funds that were very successful called the Savory Funds. This was like a PE food and beverage fund. We did like 4 or 5 different things, and several of them it ended up being really successful. But at that time, we were really looking at growth and creating new types of funds. And you guys know, like, I did this card thing forever. I obviously did really well at the card thing for a long time. I bought my house in 2010 largely by selling my basketball card collection to put the down payment down on my house. I flipped my way to paying my way through college and stuff like that back in the day. But in 2017 and 18, when this story takes place, I really had a strong feeling about where cards were going to go. And I talked about this both because I believed we'd have funds. I believed we'd have securitization or fractionalization of cards and other assets like this. And so I thought that really the time was ripe for jumping into something like this. It might surprise you to hear me say this because today I'm so collector focused, right? Most of my big cards I've owned for a really long time. And so you probably know that about me, right? Like most of my base cards I've owned for several years. But like, going back to this point in 2017 and 2018, my mind was definitely in sort of a different place, right? We change as the years go by, and I probably wasn't as collector focused then as I am now. So with all that said, my boss is walking past that day, and I said, "Hey, Greg." Greg comes into my office, and I said, "I've got an idea for you." Greg, and this was a big deal for me. I was always nervous to talk to Greg. He was like a very intimidating guy, this giant guy with a super soft voice, but like he was definitely intimidating to a lot of us. But he walked in, he sort of like pushed the door. I remember it clicked as it like went past the door, the automated door stopper, and it shut. And he said, "What's on your mind?" And he sort of sat back in the chair, and I sat on my little swivel desk chair there at my desk. And I said, "I just have an idea that I have to tell you about, that I feel really strongly about." And I told him, and this is what I said. I said, "I have, over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, built a collection that's probably worth $300,000. That was just a guess at the time. And I built it basically from nothing. And I believe that the reason that I've been able to do this is that I've been in this market for a really long time, and I understand what people want, and I can see sort of how their wants for certain types of cards is going to happen sort ahead of when it gets there. And I know that sounds strange, but I really think that I'm good at this. And this is specific to basketball cards. And I really look at this and I think that we could use this skill set that I have to start a fund, and we could really crush it. And like I think we could make a lot of money, and I think that this is really the time for this industry. So after I told him all of this, he like just sort of sat there. He sort of, whenever he would think, he would just sort of like look off into the distance. And he had a number of questions for me as part of this. And they were such smart questions. Things like, how much can one buyer, how much does one buyer buying a certain type of assets really change the value of things within the market? How much can be absorbed without noticing that buyer in the market? How would you recommend we store these items if you looked into insurance around the items? And he asked me just a ton of questions about asset classes and how I can know the things that I know, and what about my history, and what about my most valuable cards, just all these things. And I was really like, I was surprised, frankly, that he was willing to give it such thoughtfulness. And after us going back and forth for what was it wasn't like a really long time, but it was maybe, it was probably close to an hour. Greg sort of sat back and he said, I absolutely see a world that we can raise $15 to $20 million in a fund like this. Now, if you don't know, a private equity fund or a venture capital fund has is what we call a commitment-based fund, and that means that people who are sophisticated investors sign and say, "I am willing to commit X number of dollars for your investment." And then that capital is then called by the fund, meaning the fund will say, please send us 12% of your commitment. And that's what I used to do. One of the things I used to do is like send out those letters via our portal that we set up for our limited partners. And then that those entities would send us their 12%. Now, if you're not an investor type, you might be like, well, why do they always send it? How often do they send it? Almost every time we ever send a capital call to any individual, it got paid. The only times that were really missed that are worthy of note are, like when we were going through COVID, there were a couple companies that like went under, and there was weirdness there. There was a time where a guy died and his estate had some strangeness. So it took some time, but I probably called it close to $1 billion in my time at Mercado. Almost all of it was received because of the investor type, right? It's not just anybody who's investing in these funds. It's people who are able to do this. And so Greg's thought was, I think we can raise like I can't remember if he said 10 to 15 or 15 to 20. Let's just say 10 to 20. He's like, I think we could raise a $10 to $20 million fund. And I sat there and I was like, gosh, this is real. He's willing to really consider this. And he's like, draw me something up. Like let's put this together and let's think about it. And then he walked me through. He's like, I would love to fundraise on this for you. I can help provide the fundraising. You can help create this thing, and we'll share in the profits of it together. Now, keep in mind the timing and what you know now about what's happened in the world of sports cards since then. Suffice it to say, and I'll go back to the me and Greg story in a sec, but suffice it to say, had we run this fund as I proposed and as he was on board with, like the amount of money that we would have made is like, it's not even comprehensible. Like that's overstating it. We would have made many, many tens of millions of dollars. Like I might've made $100 million on this idea. That's how incredible this idea was. And it's not like it's not like it was, looking back, I'm not like the only guy who had this idea, but the timing, the things that I would have been after, the way that I would have thought through it, I absolutely would have been so crazy rich because of this. Now, as I say that, some people talk like that, and that's like their wish and their hope and their dream. Like, I wish I was super rich. I wish I was crazy rich. I actually have a different sense about the feeling, and I'll get back to that feeling in a second. But now let's go back to the Greg story. At the end of the meeting, I remember this like it was yesterday. There were two last things that Greg brought up. He said, Adam, you do know that as part of this, you would be forced to sell your collection. It's really interesting. I said, oh, I was like, okay, tell me what you're thinking about. And he said, well, if you own cards, you're always going to, and if you own cards and you're going to be investing in cards, you're always going to have a temptation to be investing in those things that you have so that you're influencing the value of those things. And we can't have that. We cannot have that in this type of fund. Pretty interesting point. I spoke to another leader in our industry years later about this same thing. And he said, you shouldn't have to sell your cards. You never want to do that. You want to be passionate. And I agreed with that leader, but I think there's some wisdom in what Greg was talking about. If you have a conflict of interest in this way, it can have a dramatic impact on how you think about things. You need to be single. Your mind needs to be single to the fund that you're investing in. It cannot be influenced in another way, or you're sort of serving two masters in a way that I don't think is really appropriate. I think Greg was right about that. And I didn't like that idea. At that point, I already had my Michael Jordan PMG. I had my Michael Jordan Gold Fusion. I had several of my key Kobe's. I had all of my big Eminence stuff. I had a bunch of stuff that I really loved. And I was like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to move this stuff. Again, it was a lot. Like I said, back then it was probably worth $250, $300, maybe $350,000. I don't have perfect records at this point, but that's what my memory sort of tells me. And I was unwilling to let it go. And so that was one big negative. And then he said this, and this was the other part that he said that was a super negative to me. He said, Adam, we can't just do sports cards. And I thought he was going to say, we can't just do basketball cards. He's like, we can't just do sports cards. We'll need this fund to be more about significant collectibles in all sorts of cases. Like we probably want to talk about watches. We probably want to find somebody who can do that. Maybe there's some other classes, but he's like, go out there and find other funds that are investing in collectibles and try to mirror those. And he said that, and I was like, man, like I get why you feel that way, but really, I really get basketball cards. Like I really get it. And I sort of tried to say that, but I didn't feel total permission. I didn't feel like he really would think about what my thoughts really on it were. And so I tried to sort of say it, but he was just like, he sort of poo-pooed it. He was like, that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to do that. And I remember he walked out and I was like, I'm going to think about this, but those two big hurdles, I just don't think I can get over those things. And so the days afterwards, I thought about it and the days turned into a few weeks. And I remember he said to a coworker, I don't know if Adam's ever going to get back to me on this. I don't know if he's serious or not. And I remember saying, I am serious and I did want to do it, but I can't do it the way that he wants to do it. I understand why he wants to do the first thing. I understand why he wants me to get rid of the cards. But I also just don't want to do this, investing in all of these different things. And what's funny is, if I look back at that time, I'll bet you that with the contacts that I had, even without Greg's help, I'll bet you I could have raised a few $1,000,000, maybe $5 million or something. Maybe not that much. That's probably wishful thinking. But we could have done great if we would have done that. But here's the thing that I think will surprise you. And this is getting back to what I was talking about earlier. I have literally no regrets that I didn't do the fund. Not a little bit. And, I know I said what I said earlier about hey, I could have made so much money, but things worked out really well. And I'm glad that the market has moved the way that it has. And I'm grateful for some of those experiences. But, it's not just about making money. And that's where I think a lot of people get lost. Some of my best friends in the whole world, I get the sense that to them, it really always comes down to making money. And that's where we each have different values. Values are what drive us, right? I'm not saying that I'm not motivated by money. There's times where I'm motivated still in ways that I sort of am not super proud of afterwards. But for the most part, I don't really think I am motivated the same way that a lot of people are. I don't I don't value my life based on how much money I've made. I don't think about those things. I know that sounds like, look at me, I'm Mr. Altruistic, but no, I really do think that this is true. Had I done the fund, and I've got several things that I want to hit here before we're done, and I'm going to finish here in the next few minutes, but had I done the fund, I would have made a lot of money, but I don't know that I would have been happier. I certainly wouldn't have the collection that I have today. I wouldn't have seen some of that same run up, but I would have made a lot of money, and maybe we could have gotten out of the fund. We would have been, the fund at this point would be done, which is kind of fun to think about. And, how much money would we have made over the course of the last 10, 9, 10 years? We would have made, the fund would have made $100 million for the investors. We would have taken so there's a management fee and there's there's a carried interest. The management fee is based on commitments. So let's say we raised $20 million. We would have made, probably we would have made, say, 1.5% of that a year. And it's based on the full commitment, regardless of how much is called. So if we raise $20 million, there's a 1.5% management fee. It's $300,000 a year that Greg and I would have split on management fee. That would have been amazing, right? It would have been great to have an extra 150 grand a year or something coming to me through that. But then really where we would have crushed it is on carried interest. The carried interest would have been 20% over everything we returned to investors. So if an investor gave us $1 million and we gave him $1.5 million, or if we got him, if we made a 1.5 total on somebody's 1 million, that's a $500,000 gain, and 20% of that effectively would have come back to us in the form of carried interest, and then 80% would have gone to the limited partner. I have no question we would have made tens of millions of dollars on this fund that would have come to us. Maybe as much as $100 million. It would have been the most incredible fund ever, because what was I buying at that point? I was buying Jordan 90s cards and all the big 90s cards that I could find, and I was getting into the 2012 Gold Prism stuff, and I was on, like, I nailed it, guys. As far as especially basketball goes, like I did, it worked out really well, and it would have been incredible. But again, I'm still glad I didn't do it. I'm going to leave you with 4 learnings, 4 things that I learned as part of this. Learning number 1 is I didn't want to give up my collection, and to me, that was the biggest deal breaker of all. I maybe could have worked out like how to work, how to buy and sell other things, but I just couldn't give up the collection. I couldn't do it. It meant too much to me to have to like take that out of my hands, and to just work in sports cards total. I had to keep my collection. Learning number 2, and this comes from learning number 1, there's a temptation to manipulate if you're spending other people's money. Greg was right about this, and it's something that I think we should consider today, and I'll get into this in number 4, but I thought about it, like, how much would I be tempted to go and buy the exact same stuff that I already had, or stuff like it, to manipulate that if I was in that decision-making capacity. And that's worth considering. I'll just get to number 4 right now, and then I'll come back to number 3. It's worth considering when you look at other buyers in the market and other people who run funds. Okay, it's really worth considering this. Does their current collection influence how they think about how they should invest in their fund? And to me, the answer is, how could it not? I think it's really hard, even if people do everything they can to separate it. It's really hard to buy your own things and to have those, and then to go out and buy for other people in the same world, knowing that buying this is going to influence this. It's really hard to not buy this stuff that you already have that's going to influence this. It's really tough. That's the human condition. We're always looking out for our own. We're always thinking of our own things. And so that's number 4, is the market is influenced massively, not just by, and this is part of it, not just by individuals who want to own cards. We used to say a person needs to have a card needs to have its own end owner or end user. But no, now entities with financial interest can dramatically influence how much stuff is worth. And that's truer than ever with the repacks, guys. It's not just funds now, it's repacks, it's all of these things where cards are bought not just for the purpose of owning them. And people have gone out there and said, this is a giant house of cards. And I think that's fair. But at the same time, I also think that the models make sense. And so like the business models, like the repack business model absolutely makes sense. I understand what they're doing, but it does introduce risk. That's not a novel thought. It's something that I've talked about, on this YouTube channel, and on my podcast in the past. But there's definitely a risk there. Again, number 4 is the market is influenced massively by not just individuals who want to own cards, but by entities with financial interests. And that's truer now than it's ever been. And then we'll go back to number 3. Number 3 is this. It is very rare to find a partner or partners who share your philosophies and interests. I am not saying, I don't know what would have happened in a partnership with me and Greg. I don't know. But I'm glad during that initial conversation, we got some of those hard things out of the way, because if we had let it go down the path, and if I had gone into that business, think about what I would have given up. And then think about what if it wouldn't have worked out well? What if the partnership would have fallen apart? What if they would have just sort of said, this isn't working. Let's just divest this, or let's call the fund a day and let's get out of it. What if we had done any of those things? I wouldn't have had the opportunities to do some of the things that I've done. And a lot of the buying that I did really in those years between when this happened, 2017, 2018, and then 2020, 2021, all the big cards, most of the big cards that I have, I bought during that time or just before. And I would have sold those ones just before. And so the partners that you sign up with, guys, and this is true in marriage too, it's really rare to find a partner who shares your philosophies, shares your interests. And the best thing that you can do in your life is to find partners who are easy to work with, who help you to be better, who support you, who want the best for you. Again, that's true of spouse, partner. That's true of, friends. That's true of coworkers. And it's true of people you go into business with. The hardest thing is having a partner where you're not 100% sure. And don't know what would happen with me and Greg. Glad I didn't do it, but financially may have been the worst decision that I ever made in my life. All right, guys, hope you guys enjoyed that story today. If you haven't already, make sure you check out 25 and 25 iconic book. Put this together last year with the help of almost 500 of you. And what came out of it in the end was the community's belief of what the ranked list of the 25 most iconic cards were of the 2000s. This book is about that survey, or about that crowdsourcing exercise. There's a lot of learnings in it. Check it out. Put the link below. Thanks for joining. And until next time, happy collecting.